The mockery begins. The joke of the galaxy. The laughter echoed through the massive docking bay of Nexus Station, the galaxy's most prestigious military hub. Captain Dane Morrison stood on the observation deck, watching as sleek alien vessels glided past his ship like silver dreams through space. The Zephyrian cruisers moved with liquid grace, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that bent light around them. The Arctanian battleships floated like crystalline cathedrals, their transparent armor gleaming with inner fire. Even the smallest, fighter craft from the Helix Confederation looked like works of art, all curves and flowing lines that seemed to dance through the void. Then there was his ship. The UES Ironclad sat in the docking bay like a wounded beast among gazelles. She was a massive angular monster of gray steel and riveted plates, her hull scarred by countless repairs and modifications. Steam vented from her ancient cooling systems and her engines growled with the deep rumble of fusion reactors that belonged in a museum. To anyone looking at her, the Ironclad seemed like humanity's embarrassing attempt to play with the big boys of galactic warfare. Morrison's weathered face remained stone cold as he watched a group of Zephyrian officers pointing at his ship and chittering in their musical language. He didn't need a translator to know they were mocking the human vessel. At 52 years old, Morrison had seen enough combat to fill 3 lifetimes, and his gray eyes held the weight of battles fought in the darkness between stars. His uniform was crisp but practical, without the ornate decorations that other species seemed to love. The Council of Mockery. The central command briefing room was a marvel of alien architecture, with holographic displays floating in perfect formation around a circular table made of some kind of living crystal. Representatives from 12 different species sat in chairs designed for their unique physiologies, their attention focused on the massive tactical display showing the galaxy's current military deployments. General Kithra of the Zephyrian Empire was speaking, her 4 arms gesturing gracefully as she outlined the patrol assignments. Her species was renowned for their speed and agility, both in space and in politics. The outer rim sectors require careful monitoring, she said, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We've assigned our fastest reconnaissance fleets to cover the most critical areas. Admiral Jorvik of the Helix Confederation nodded his massive head, the bioluminescent patches on his scaled skin pulsing with agreement. Our psychic-guided vessels can sense disturbances across vast distances. We'll maintain watch over the middle territories. Then Morrison entered the room, his heavy boots echoing on the crystal floor. The conversation stopped abruptly as all eyes turned to the human captain. His presence was like a discordant note in an otherwise harmonious symphony. "Ah, Captain Morrison," General Kithra said, barely hiding her amusement. "We were just discussing patrol assignments. Given the limitations of your vessel, we've prepared a suitable route for the Ironclad." The holographic display shifted to show a quiet sector near the galaxy's edge. Far from any strategic importance or potential conflict zones, it was essentially a cosmic backwater, the kind of assignment given to ships that couldn't handle real responsibility. "The Forgotten Reach," Admiral Jorvik rumbled. "Quiet, empty, perfect for slower vessels. You can patrol at your own pace, without affecting critical operations." Morrison's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "The Ironclad may not be fast, but she's reliable. We've never failed a mission." A ripple of barely contained laughter went around the room. Captain Xylith of the Quantum Corsairs, a being of pure energy contained in a mechanical shell, flickered with what might have been amusement. "Reliable, yes, like an ancient grinding wheel. It works, but there are better tools available." The Ironclad's secrets back aboard his ship. Morrison walked through corridors that felt more like the bowels of an industrial complex than a starship. The walls were lined with analog gauges, mechanical switches, and displays that used actual glass, screens instead of holographic projections. Everything was built to last, designed by engineers who believed in function over form. He found his senior staff gathered in the war room, a cramped space dominated by a plotting table that looked like it belonged in a museum. Commander Rachel Stone, his first officer, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who had grown up on the mining colonies of the outer systems. She understood hardship and knew how to make broken things work again. "Let me guess," she said without looking up from the navigation charts. "They gave us the scenic route through nowhere." "The Forgotten Reach," Morrison confirmed. "Apparently, it's perfect for ships that can't keep up with modern warfare." Chief Engineer Miguel Torres looked up from his tablet, a grin splitting his scarred face. Torres was a master of improvisation, the kind of man who could rebuild a fusion reactor with spare parts and determination. "If they only knew what we've been working on down in the engine rooms." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "They'll learn soon enough. How's the project coming?" "Better than expected," Torres replied. "The modifications are complete and all systems are running green. We're ready for field testing whenever you give the word." The captain moved to the viewing port, looking out at the other ships in the docking bay. Each one represented the pinnacle of their species' technology, generations of advancement in materials science, energy manipulation, and artificial intelligence. But they all shared one critical weakness that their creators had never considered. The hidden strength Lieutenant Jake Hoffman, the ship's communications officer, was monitoring the fleet's general channels when he picked up something interesting. The young officer had grown up in the Detroit shipyards where the ironclad was built, and he understood the philosophy behind human engineering better than most. "Captain," he called out, "you might want to hear this. The Zephyrians are placing bets on how long we'll last in our first real engagement." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "What are the odds?" 3-1 against us surviving a single battle with hostile forces. They're calling us the Antique Squadron." Commander Stone snorted. "If they only knew what we're really carrying down in the restricted sections." The truth was that the ironclad was far more than she appeared. While other species had focused on making their ships faster, more elegant, and more automated, humanity had taken a different approach. They had built their vessel to be absolutely immune to the kind of warfare that was becoming increasingly common in the galaxy. Every system on the ironclad was analog, hardened against electromagnetic pulses, cyber attacks, and quantum interference. While enemy ships relied on complex AI networks and integrated computer systems, the ironclad operated like a mechanical clock, with each component functioning independently. Her armor wasn't just thick. It was layered with materials that absorbed energy and disrupted scanning attempts. Most importantly, hidden deep in her heavily shielded core, was Project Goliath. It was humanity's answer to the increasing sophistication of galactic warfare, a weapon so brutal and primitive that it violated several interstellar treaties. The other species had focused on precision and elegance in their weapons. Humanity had focused on raw, devastating power. The warning signs. As the fleet prepared to depart Nexus Station, reports began filtering in from the outer territories. Scout ships were going missing. Entire colonies were losing contact with the galactic network, and there were strange energy readings detected in previously empty space. Something was moving in the darkness between stars, something that didn't match any known species in the galactic database. General Cathera dismissed these reports as equipment malfunctions or possibly raids by primitive civilizations. "The outer rim has always been unstable," she announced during the final briefing. "A few missing scouts hardly constitute a threat to our advanced fleets." But Morrison had spent decades fighting in those outer territories. He knew the difference between routine piracy and something genuinely dangerous. The pattern of disappearances, the energy signatures, the complete lack of survivors or wreckage all pointed to a threat that the other species weren't taking seriously enough. As the ironclad powered up her ancient engines and prepared to depart for the Forgotten Reach, Morrison stood on his bridge surrounded by instruments that belonged to an earlier era of warfare. His crew was small compared to the massive complements carried by alien vessels, but every one of them was a specialist who understood their equipment intimately. "All stations report ready, Captain," Commander Stone announced. Morrison settled into his command chair, a simple seat built for function rather than comfort. "Take us out, Commander. Let's show them what human engineering can really do." The ironclad lumbered out of dock like a awakening giant, her engines casting long trails of plasma into space. Behind her, the elegant alien vessels watched with a mixture of pity and amusement. They had no idea that they were watching the birth of something that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. In the depths of space, ancient sensors detected the movement of the human fleet and began calculating response protocols. The real test was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the oldest, slowest, and most primitive approach was exactly what the situation required. The storm gathering. The first silence. 3 days into their patrol of the Forgotten Reach, the UES Ironclad received its first distress signal. Lieutenant Hoffman was monitoring the long-range communications array when the transmission came through, crackling with static and interference that shouldn't have existed in the supposedly empty sector. "Captain, to the bridge," Hoffman called out, his voice tight with concern. "We're getting an emergency broadcast from the Zephyrian scout ship Windchaser." Morrison arrived within minutes, his boots echoing in the corridor as he strode onto the bridge. The Ironclad's command center was a study in functional brutality, with thick armor plating visible between the instrument panels and analog displays that glowed with steady, reliable light. "What's the situation?" Morrison asked, settling into his command chair. Hoffman adjusted the frequency manually, his hands working the physical dials with practiced precision. "The signal is weak and broken up, but I'm picking up fragments. Something about system failures, weapons not responding, and..." He paused, listening intently to his headphones. "Sir, they're saying their AI is turning against them." Commander Stone looked up from her tactical display, her expression grim. "That's impossible. Zephyrian AI systems have triple redundancy and quantum-locked loyalty protocols. They can't be hacked or corrupted." The transmission suddenly cleared, and a panicked voice filled the bridge, speaking in accented Standard Galactic. "This is Captain Theris of the Windchaser. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our ship's systems are failing. The AI has locked us out of weapons control and is firing on our own escort vessels. We need immediate assistance. Our position is..." The signal cut to static, then dead silence. Morrison stared at the communications panel for a long moment. "Hoffman, get me a fix on that transmission's origin point." "Already working on it, sir. The signal came from grid reference 7-7 Alpha, approximately 2 light-years from our current position." "Stone, what's our best speed to that location?" His first officer consulted her navigation charts. "At full burn, we can be there in 18 hours. But sir, if whatever hit the Windchaser is still in the area, then we'll deal with it when we get there," Morrison said firmly. "Torres, I want the ship ready for combat operations. Bring all systems online and prepare for possible hostile contact." The chief engineer's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. "Aye, Captain. Should I activate the special modifications?" Morrison considered this. The modifications Torres had made were still experimental, and using them would reveal capabilities that humanity preferred to keep secret. But if they were facing a threat that could corrupt Zephyrian AI systems, conventional weapons might not be enough. "Not yet," he decided. "Let's see what we're dealing with first." The graveyard. 18 hours later, the Ironclad dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates where the Windchaser had sent its last transmission. What they found made even Morrison's experienced crew fall silent. Floating in the void were the remains of not just one ship, but an entire Zephyrian patrol squadron. The elegant vessels that had been the pride of their fleet were now twisted wrecks, their hulls torn open and their bioluminescent systems dark. But most disturbing was the way they had been destroyed. "Scanning the wreckage," reported Ensign Davis from the sensor station. The young officer was fresh from the academy, but he had proven himself capable during their journey to the outer rim. "Sir, these ships weren't destroyed by conventional weapons. The damage patterns are strange." "Explain," Morrison ordered. Davis consulted his readouts, his brow furrowed in confusion. "The hull breaches appear to have been caused from the inside out. It's as if the ships tore themselves apart. And there's something else, sir. The wreckage is completely cold. No residual heat signatures, no radiation, nothing. It's like these ships have been dead for months, not hours." Commander Stone moved to the tactical display, her fingers dancing over the manual controls. Captain, I'm detecting debris from at least 6 different vessel types. Zephyrian scouts, a Helix Confederation destroyer, and what looks like pieces of an Arctanian research vessel. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. If the enemy could take out such a diverse group of ships with different technologies and defensive systems, they were dealing with something far more dangerous than simple pirates or raiders. Any sign of survivors? He asked. Negative, Davis replied. No life signs, no escape pods, no emergency beacons. Whatever happened here, it was fast and complete. The captain studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the destroyed vessels. They had been arranged in a standard defensive formation, suggesting they had time to prepare for battle. But something had overwhelmed them so quickly that they hadn't even been able to launch their escape pods. Hoffman, send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we found evidence of a new hostile force in the outer territories. Request immediate reinforcement and upgraded threat assessment. Aye, sir. Transmitting now. As Hoffman worked at his communications console, Morrison walked to the main view screen. The wreckage of the alien vessels drifted silently in space, a testament to the vulnerability of even the most advanced technology when faced with an unknown threat. The hunters revealed themselves. The attack came without warning. One moment the ironclad was alone among the wreckage. The next moment space itself seemed to ripple and tear as massive shapes emerged from what had appeared to be empty void. Contact, Davis shouted. Multiple hostiles bearing 045 Mark 12. Sir, they just appeared out of nowhere. Morrison was already moving toward his command chair as the ship's alert klaxons began to wail. All hands to battle stations. Stone, get me a tactical assessment. The main view screen shifted to show their attackers, and Morrison felt his blood run cold. The enemy vessels were unlike anything in the galactic database. They were organic in appearance, with hulls that seemed to pulse and writhe like living tissue, but they were clearly artificial constructs. Dark energy fields surrounded them, and strange appendages that might have been weapons or sensors extended from their sides like the legs of some cosmic spider. Sir, I count 12 enemy vessels, Stone reported. They're moving in a coordinated pattern, but their formation doesn't match any known tactical doctrine. What about their capabilities? Morrison asked. Davis was working frantically at his sensor array. Sir, I can't get a clear reading on their systems. They're jamming our sensors somehow, but not with conventional electronic warfare. It's like they're bending space around themselves. The lead enemy vessel, larger than the rest and covered in what looked like metallic scales, suddenly pulsed with dark energy. A beam of something that wasn't quite light and wasn't quite matter lanced out toward the ironclad. Incoming, Stone shouted. Brace for impact. The beam struck the ironclad's forward shields, and every electronic system on the ship screamed in protest. But instead of the devastating explosion that Morrison expected, the shields held. The beam seemed to slide off the ship's defensive barriers like water off a duck's back. Damage report, Morrison barked. Torres's voice crackled over the intercom. All systems nominal, Captain. Whatever they just hit us with, our analog systems shrugged it off like it was nothing. Morrison felt a grim smile cross his face. This was exactly the kind of situation the ironclad had been built for. While other ships relied on complex computer networks and AI systems that could be corrupted or hacked, the ironclad operated on principles that were as old as warfare itself. Return fire, he ordered. Target the lead vessel with main batteries. The ironclad's guns were not elegant. They were massive kinetic accelerators that hurled chunks of dense metal at significant fractions of light speed. When they fired, the entire ship shuddered with the recoil, and space lit up with the fury of controlled violence. The projectiles slammed into the lead enemy vessel, and Morrison was satisfied to see actual damage. Whatever these things were, they could be hurt by conventional weapons. But his satisfaction was short-lived. The enemy formation began to shift and change, and more of those dark energy beams lanced out toward the ironclad. This time they seemed to be targeting the ship's systems specifically. They're trying to hack our computers, Hoffman reported. But sir, they can't seem to find any to hack. Our analog systems are invisible to whatever they're using. That, was when Morrison realized what they were dealing with. These weren't just hostile aliens, they were something far worse. They were hunters that specialized in corrupting and controlling the advanced technology that other species had become dependent on. "Stone, get me a firing solution on all targets," Morrison ordered. "Torres, I want maximum power to the guns. We're going to show these things what human engineering can do." The battle that followed was unlike anything Morrison had experienced in his decades of combat. The enemy vessels moved with fluid grace, their attacks precisely coordinated and devastatingly effective, but every time they tried to disable the ironclad with their corruption beams, they found nothing to corrupt. The human ship was like a rock in a digital ocean, immune to the very weapons that had destroyed the advanced alien vessels. "Captain," Davis called out, "I'm picking up more contacts, sir. There are dozens of them, maybe hundreds, moving in from all directions." Morrison studied the tactical display as more enemy vessels appeared on the screen. They were completely surrounded, outnumbered by at least 50 to 1, and facing an enemy that had already proven capable of destroying entire fleets. But instead of fear, Morrison felt a cold, calculating anger. These things had destroyed ships full of sentient beings, had turned advanced technology against its creators, and had threatened the stability of the entire galaxy. They thought they were hunters, but they were about to learn what it meant to face prey that could fight back. "Hoffman, send another message to Fleet Command," Morrison ordered. "Tell them we've made contact with the hostiles and are engaging. Also tell them to spread the word to all ships. Analog systems only. No AI, no networked computers, no integrated systems. This enemy can turn our own technology against us." As the ironclad prepared for the fight of her life, Morrison realized that this was the moment humanity had been preparing for without knowing it. While other species had embraced elegant complexity, humans had remained stubbornly attached to brutal simplicity. And in this cosmic game of hunter and prey, simplicity might be the only thing that could save them all. The real war was about to begin. The gauntlet. The battle raged for 3 hours, and the ironclad fought like a cornered beast. Morrison stood on his bridge watching the tactical display as his gunners systematically destroyed one enemy vessel after another. The alien ships were fast and coordinated, but they had made a fatal assumption about their prey. "Target destroyed," reported Gunnery Sergeant Beck, the ship's weapons officer. Beck was a veteran of the Titan Wars, a woman who understood that sometimes the only way to solve a problem was to hit it with enough firepower to make it go away permanently. "That's number 17, Captain." 18, corrected Stone from her position at the tactical console. "The port battery just took out another one of those smaller hunters." Morrison nodded grimly. The ironclad's guns were doing their job, but the enemy kept coming. For every ship they destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear from the twisted space around them. Whatever these things were, they had numbers on their side. "Davis, what's our ammunition status?" Morrison asked. The young ensign consulted his analog readouts. "We're down to 60% on kinetic rounds, sir. At this rate of fire, we'll be empty in another 2 hours." That was the problem with old-fashioned warfare. Unlike energy weapons that could fire indefinitely as long as they had power, kinetic weapons required physical ammunition. And the ironclad was burning through her stores at an alarming rate. "Torres," Morrison called into the intercom. "I need more options down there." The chief engineer's voice crackled back, competing with the sound of damage control teams working frantically in the background. "Captain, I think it's time to show them what we've really been working on. The modifications are ready for combat testing." Morrison had been hoping to avoid revealing humanity's hidden capabilities, but they were running out of conventional options. The enemy had them surrounded, outnumbered, and was slowly wearing them down through sheer attrition. "Do it," Morrison ordered. "Activate the modifications." The beast awakens, deep in the ironclad's heavily armored belly, systems that had been dormant since the ship's construction began to come online. Torres moved through the restricted engineering sections like a man possessed, his hands flying over controls that most of his crew didn't even know existed. The modifications had been years in the making, a secret project that combined human engineering with salvaged alien technology in ways that violated several interstellar treaties. While other species had focused on making their ships more elegant, and efficient, humanity had focused on making them more dangerous. Initiating power transfer to the experimental systems, Torres reported. Captain, you're going to feel this throughout the ship. The ironclad began to change. Her hull plates shifted and reconfigured, revealing weapon systems that had been hidden beneath layers of armor plating. Her engines, already powerful, began to draw energy from sources that didn't appear on any official schematic. Most importantly, her sensor arrays extended and unfolded, revealing detection capabilities that far exceeded what should have been possible for a ship of her apparent age and design. "My God," whispered Davis, staring at his suddenly expanded sensor readouts. "Sir, I can see everything. The enemy ships, their formation patterns, even the way they're communicating with each other." Morrison felt the ship's transformation through the deck plates beneath his feet. The ironclad had always been powerful, but now she felt truly alive, like a predator that had been pretending to sleep. "Stone, what's our tactical situation now?" Morrison asked. His first officer was studying the enhanced displays with amazement. "Captain, we're not just seeing their ships anymore. We're seeing their entire network. They're connected to each other through some kind of quantum entanglement system, sharing information instantaneously across their entire fleet. Can we disrupt it?" Morrison asked. Torres's voice came over the intercom, excitement clear in his tone. "Better than that, sir. I think we can turn it against them. The modifications include a quantum disruption field that should be able to inject false information into their network." Morrison smiled grimly. This was exactly the kind of dirty fighting that humans excelled at. While other species fought, with honor and elegance, humans fought to win. "Do it," he ordered. "Let's see how they like their own medicine." The hunter becomes the hunted. The quantum disruption field activated with a sound like reality tearing. Suddenly, the perfectly coordinated enemy formation began to fall apart as false information flooded their communication network. Ships that had been moving in perfect harmony suddenly found themselves firing on each other, their targeting systems corrupted by the ironclad's electronic warfare. "It's working," Stone reported with satisfaction. "Their formation is collapsing. They're losing coordination." But Morrison knew that the enemy wouldn't stay confused for long. Whatever intelligence controlled these ships would adapt quickly once it realized what was happening. "All batteries, target the largest concentration of enemy vessels," Morrison ordered. "Hit them while they're disorganized." The ironclad's guns roared again, but this time they were joined by new weapon systems that had been hidden within the ship's hull. Particle beams lanced out alongside the kinetic rounds, and missile tubes that hadn't appeared on any schematic opened to launch salvos of guided warheads. The enemy ships, still confused by the false information flooding their network, were caught completely off guard. In the space of 10 minutes, the ironclad destroyed more enemy vessels than she had in the previous 3 hours of combat. But the victory came at a cost. The quantum disruption field was drawing enormous amounts of power, and the ship's experimental systems were operating at the edge of their design parameters. "Torres, how long can we maintain this?" Morrison asked. "Not long, Captain. The field generators are already showing stress fractures. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they burn out completely." Morrison studied the tactical display. They had reduced the enemy numbers significantly, but there were still dozens of hostile vessels in the area. And in the distance, his enhanced sensors were detecting something that made his blood run cold. "Davis, confirm that contact at bearing 270 Mark 15, Morrison ordered. The ensign worked his instruments frantically. "Sir, it's massive. At least 10 times the size of the largest enemy vessel we've encountered so far. And Captain, it's moving toward us." The mothership. The thing that emerged from the twisted space was not a ship in any conventional sense. It was a living mountain of metal and flesh, a hybrid construction that defied classification. Its hull pulsed with organic rhythms, while mechanical weapon systems tracked across its surface like the eyes of some cosmic predator. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered Beck from her gunnery station. "What is that thing?" Morrison had seen a lot of strange things in his years of service, but nothing had prepared him for this. The creature ship was easily the size of a small moon, and it radiated a malevolent intelligence that was almost palpable through the vacuum of space. "It's their command ship," Stone said, her voice tight with tension. "Look at the way the other vessels are repositioning. They're forming a protective screen around it." The massive entity began to pulse with dark energy, and Morrison realized that whatever weapon had destroyed the alien fleets was housed within that monstrous hull. If it fired at full power, even the ironclad's enhanced defenses might not be enough to save them. "Torres, I need everything you've got," Morrison said into the intercom. "Emergency power to all systems. Prepare to activate Project Goliath." There was a pause before Torres responded. "Sir, Project Goliath isn't ready for combat deployment. The containment systems are still experimental." "Then we'll have to hope they work," Morrison replied. "Because if we don't stop that thing, it's going to do to us what it did to those other fleets." The chief engineer's voice was grim when he responded. "Understood, Captain. Initiating Project Goliath startup sequence. But sir, once we fire this weapon, there's no going back. The galaxy will know what humanity is really capable of." Morrison looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were afraid, but they were also determined. They understood that they were fighting not just for their own lives, but for the future of every species in the galaxy. "Then let them know," Morrison said quietly. "Let them all know that humanity doesn't go quietly into the night." The point of no return. As Project Goliath began its startup sequence, the ironclad transformed once again. This time the changes were more dramatic. Her hull split open along previously invisible seams, revealing a weapon system that looked like it had been torn from the nightmares of some mad god. The device at the ship's heart began to glow with an energy that hurt to look at directly. "Goliath is online," Torres reported. "All safeties are disengaged. Captain, this weapon draws power directly from the ship's fusion core. Once we fire, we'll have maybe 5 minutes before the reactor overloads." "Will it be enough to stop that thing?" Morrison asked. Torres was quiet for a moment. "Sir, Project Goliath was designed to crack planets. I think it'll be enough." The enemy command ship had finished its approach and was now targeting the ironclad with weapons that could corrupt the very fabric of spacetime. Morrison could see the dark energy building along its hull, preparing to unleash the same force that had destroyed entire fleets. "Fire," Morrison ordered. Project Goliath discharged with a sound like the universe screaming. The weapon didn't fire a beam or a projectile. Instead, it reached out with invisible fingers of force and began to tear the enemy command ship apart at the molecular level. The massive creature ship writhed and pulsed as its hull began to come apart, its organic components separating from its mechanical systems in a display of destruction that was both beautiful and terrible. But even as it died, the command ship managed to fire its own weapon. The dark energy beam lanced out toward the ironclad, carrying with it the power to corrupt and destroy everything it touched. Morrison gripped his command chair as the beam struck his ship. For a moment everything went white, and he was certain that they were all about to die. But then the light faded, and the ironclad was still there, battered but intact. "Damage report," Morrison called out. "Minimal damage to hull and systems," Stone reported with amazement. "Sir, our analog systems protected us. The corruption beam couldn't find anything to corrupt." Morrison looked at the tactical display, which showed the wreckage of the enemy command ship drifting in space. The other hostile vessels were already beginning to withdraw, their coordinated attack falling apart without their central command. "Torres, shut down Project Goliath," Morrison ordered, "and send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've engaged and defeated the enemy command ship, and tell them to prepare for a new kind of war." As the ironclad limped away from the battlefield, Morrison realized that everything had changed. Humanity had revealed its true capabilities, and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The joke was over, and the real war was just beginning. The Titan's Awakening, the silence before the storm. 5 days after the destruction of the enemy command ship, the galaxy held its breath. The ironclad had limped back to Nexus Station, her hull scarred and her experimental systems pushed beyond their limits. but the victory had come at a price that Morrison was only beginning to understand. The station's docking bay was eerily quiet as the human warship settled into her berth. No crowds gathered to watch, no alien dignitaries came to offer congratulations. Instead, the other ships kept their distance, their crews watching the ironclad with a mixture of fear and suspicion that hadn't been there before. Morrison stood in the station's command center, facing a council of alien leaders whose expressions ranged from nervous to openly hostile. General Cathera's forearms trembled slightly as she consulted her reports, while Admiral Jorvek's bioluminescent patches flickered with agitation. "Captain Morrison," General Cathera began, her musical voice strained. "Your report describes weapons and capabilities that were never declared to the Galactic Defense Council. The use of planet-killing technology violates several interstellar treaties." Morrison's weathered face remained impassive. "General, those treaties were written before we knew what we were facing. The Void Hunters aren't bound by our laws or our sense of honor. They're a threat to every living being in this galaxy." Captain Xylith of the Quantum Corsairs flickered with indignation. "You speak of threats while hiding weapons that could destroy entire worlds. How do we know that humanity won't turn these weapons against us?" The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Morrison could feel the tension in the room, the way the alien representatives had subtly positioned themselves as if preparing for conflict. The fear in their eyes told him everything he needed to know about how the galaxy now viewed humanity. "Because," Morrison said quietly, "if we wanted to destroy you, you'd already be dead." The silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Jorvek's massive frame shifted uncomfortably in his chair, while several of the smaller species representatives exchanged nervous glances. "That," said a new voice from the chamber's entrance, "is exactly what we're afraid of. The new reality." The speaker was Admiral Voss of the Terran fleet, a man Morrison had served under during the Colonial Rebellion 20 years earlier. Voss was tall and lean, with silver hair and the kind of steady gaze that came from making difficult decisions in impossible situations. His arrival at Nexus Station meant that Earth was taking the situation seriously. "Admiral," Morrison acknowledged, with a slight nod. Voss moved to the center of the chamber, his dress uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various classifications, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what's happening in this galaxy." General Cathera's arms gestured in the Zephyrian equivalent of confusion. "Admiral Voss, we were discussing the illegal weapons deployed by your captain." "No," Voss replied firmly. "You were discussing how to contain a threat you don't understand. The Void Hunters aren't just another hostile species. They're a civilization-ending plague that feeds on the very technological advancement that defines modern galactic society." He activated a holographic display that showed the enemy's expansion patterns across the outer rim. "In the past month, they've consumed 17 star systems, not conquered, consumed. Every AI, every networked system, every piece of integrated technology has been turned against its creators. The more advanced the civilization, the faster it falls." Admiral Jorvek leaned forward, his scaled skin rippling with concern. "You're suggesting that our technological superiority is a weakness?" "I'm not suggesting it," Voss said coldly. "I'm stating it as fact. Your ships are marvels of engineering, but they're also perfect targets for an enemy that specializes in corrupting advanced systems. Humanity's primitive technology is the only thing standing between you and extinction." Captain Xylith's energy form pulsed with anger. "So what do you propose? That we abandon centuries of technological progress and return to crude mechanical systems?" Voss smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm proposing that you recognize reality. The age of elegant warfare is over. The Void Hunters have seen to that. What's coming next is going to be brutal, primitive, and absolutely necessary if any of us want to survive." The gathering storm, as if summoned by Voss's words, alarms began to wail throughout Nexus Station. Emergency lights bathed the council chamber in red as automated systems announced the arrival of unscheduled contacts at the edge of the system. Morrison was already moving toward the tactical displays before the first alarm finished sounding. His years of combat experience had taught him to recognize the difference between a drill and genuine danger. "Report," he barked at the station's tactical officer, a young Helix Confederation lieutenant whose bioluminescent patches were flashing in distress. "Sir, we're detecting massive spatial distortions at the system's edge. Multiple contacts, estimated at over 300 vessels, moving in coordinated formation toward the station." Morrison felt his blood turn to ice. 300 ships was far larger than any previous Void Hunter attack. This wasn't a raid or a probing assault. This was an invasion force. "Time to intercept?" Morrison asked. "At their current speed, approximately 4 hours until they reach the station's defensive perimeter." Admiral Voss had joined Morrison at the tactical station, his face grim as he studied the enemy formation. "This is what I was afraid of. The destruction of their command ship hasn't weakened them. It's made them angry." General Cathara approached, her musical voice tight with panic. "Admiral, we have fewer than 50 ships at this station, and most of them are support vessels or light scouts. We cannot possibly stand against a force of that size." "Then we evacuate," suggested Captain Xyleth. "Fall back to a more defensible position and call for reinforcements." Morrison shook his head. "There's no time. By the time reinforcements arrive, the Void Hunters will have consumed this entire system and moved on to the next. We make our stand here, or we don't make it at all." Admiral Voss was studying the tactical display with the intensity of a man trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Morrison, what's the status of the ironclad?" "Repairs are ongoing, but we're operational. The experimental systems are stable, and we still have 2 charges left for Project Goliath. That's not going to be enough against 300 ships." Morrison was quiet for a moment, then turned to face the assembled alien leaders. "Maybe not, but we're not the only humans in this system." The revelation. What Morrison said next sent shockwaves through the council chamber. "Admiral Voss, I think it's time to activate the Prometheus Protocol." The alien representatives looked confused, but Admiral Voss's face went pale. "Morrison, are you certain? Once we activate Prometheus, there's no going back. The galaxy will know exactly what humanity has been preparing for." "They're going to find out anyway," Morrison replied. "Better they learn from our victory than from our defeat." General Kithara's forearms gestured frantically. "What is the Prometheus Protocol? What haven't you told us?" Admiral Voss took a deep breath. "For the past 50 years, humanity has been building a secret fleet. Not explorers or diplomats or even traditional warships. We've been building hunters, ships designed specifically to fight an enemy that uses advanced technology against its creators." The holographic display shifted to show new contacts throughout the system. Ships that had been hidden, disguised as asteroids, cargo haulers, and even space debris were suddenly revealing themselves. The sleek lines and elegant curves favored by other species were nowhere to be seen. Instead, these vessels looked like the ironclad's siblings, brutal, angular, and built for one purpose. 47 ships, Voss announced. Each one equipped with analog systems, kinetic weapons, and enough firepower to crack a moon. They've been waiting in this system for 5 years, pretending to be civilian vessels and support craft. Captain Xyleth's energy form flickered with shock. "You've been spying on us, building a secret fleet under our noses." "We've been preparing," Morrison corrected, "because we knew that someday the galaxy would face a threat that elegant technology couldn't handle. Today is that day." The tactical display updated as the hidden fleet began to move into attack formation. Unlike the graceful maneuvers favored by alien vessels, the human ships moved with brutal efficiency, taking positions that maximize their firepower while minimizing their exposure to enemy weapons. Admiral Jorvik's bioluminescent patches were pulsing rapidly. "This changes everything. If humanity has been building secret fleets, what else have you been hiding?" Admiral Voss's expression was hard as steel. "What we've been hiding, Admiral, is the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. While you've been perfecting the art of civilized warfare, we've been preparing for war itself, the battle for everything." The Void Hunter fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of locusts, their twisted ships spreading across the system in a formation that defied conventional tactical analysis. At their center was something that made even the previous command ship look small, a massive construct that seemed to be part vessel, part space station, and part living organism. "Mother of God," whispered the Helix Confederation tactical officer. "That thing is the size of a small planet." Morrison studied the enemy formation, noting the way the smaller ships moved in perfect coordination around their Titanic flagship. It's not just a command ship, it's a factory. They're not here to raid or conquer, they're here to convert this entire system into more of themselves. The alien fleet at Nexus Station began to scatter, their elegant vessels fleeing toward the system's edge in a desperate attempt to escape the approaching nightmare. But the human ships held their position, forming a defensive line between the station and the enemy. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Voss," came the transmission across the fleet's communication channels. "Execute Battle Plan Omega. Authorization code, Remember Earth." The response came back in 47 different voices, each one carrying the weight of humanity's determination. Remember Earth. Morrison took his position on the ironclad's bridge, surrounded by his crew and the analog instruments that had kept them alive through countless battles. Around him, the hidden fleet of humanity's secret hunters began to power up weapons that violated every treaty the galaxy had ever signed. "Torres, bring Project Goliath online," Morrison ordered. "Full power, maximum yield." "Aye, Captain, Goliath is charging, time to full power 8 minutes." On the tactical display, the Void Hunter fleet was accelerating toward them, confident in their ability to corrupt and control any technology they encountered. They had no idea that they were about to face an enemy that had abandoned the elegant complexity of modern warfare in favor of something far more dangerous. They were about to face humanity at war, the moment of truth. As the distance between the fleets closed, Morrison opened a channel to every ship in the system, human, alien, and enemy alike. His voice carried the weight of his species' history, from the first humans who picked up rocks to defend their caves to the men and women who now prepared to defend their galaxy. "This is Captain Dane Morrison of the UES Ironclad speaking for the human race. You came to our galaxy expecting to find prey. Instead, you found predators. You thought our primitive technology made us weak. Instead, it made us immune to your weapons. You believed that your coordination and superiority would ensure your victory. Instead, you've awakened something that should have stayed sleeping." The enemy fleet continued its approach, seemingly unaffected by Morrison's words. But the human captain wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking to history itself. For too long, humanity has been the galaxy's joke. The slow, primitive species that couldn't keep up with advanced civilizations. Today that ends. Today you learn why we survived when others fell. Today you learn what it means to fight a species that evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. Project Goliath reached full power, and the ironclad began to vibrate with barely contained energy. Around her, 46 other human warships prepared to unleash weapons that would rewrite the rules of galactic warfare. "Fire," Morrison ordered. The galaxy would never be the same. Birth of an empire. The fury unleashed. The first salvo from the human fleet lit up space like the birth of a new star. 48 ships fired as one, their weapons unleashing the accumulated fury of a species that had been underestimated for too long. Project Goliath devices aboard 7 different vessels discharged simultaneously, tearing holes in reality itself as they reached out to unmake the enemy flagship. Morrison gripped his command chair as the ironclad bucked under the recoil of her main weapons. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the precision of a machine, their hands flying over analog controls that had become extensions of their will. "Direct hit on the enemy flagship," reported Davis, his young voice tight with excitement. "Sir, we're reading massive structural damage across its forward sections." But even as the human weapons carved into the planet-sized enemy vessel, the Void Hunter fleet pressed forward. Their smaller ships moved like a swarm of mechanical insects, weaving between the human defensive line while their corruption beams lanced out toward the analog warships. "Incoming fire," Stone called out. multiple targets painting us with targeting beams. The enemy weapons struck the ironclad's hull, but instead of the devastating system failures that had crippled other fleets, the beams simply dissipated against analog armor and mechanical systems. The Void Hunter's primary advantage was useless against technology that predated digital integration by centuries. "Return fire all batteries," Morrison ordered. "Show them what human engineering can do." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The elegant dance of energy weapons and coordinated fleet maneuvers gave way to something far more primitive and infinitely more deadly. The human ships fought like rabid wolves, using tactics that other species would have considered barbaric. Admiral Voss's voice crackled over the fleet communication channel. "All ships execute pattern Omega-7. Target their command nodes and ignore the small fry." The human fleet broke formation, abandoning the neat lines and coordinated movements that characterized galactic warfare. Instead, they scattered into hunting packs, each group focusing on a different section of the enemy fleet with single-minded determination. The Tide Turns Taurus's voice echoed through the ironclad's intercom system as the ship shuddered under another volley of enemy fire. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the enemy flagship. Whatever they're charging, it's drawing power from every ship in their fleet." Morrison studied the tactical display, watching as the smaller Void Hunter vessels began to dim and slow. "They're sacrificing their escort ships to power some kind of superweapon." The enemy flagship, despite the massive damage inflicted by the human fleet's opening salvo, was still operational. Worse, it was growing. As power flowed into it from the dying escort ships, new sections began to unfold from its hull like the petals of some mechanical flower. "Sir," Davis called out, his voice strained, "I'm reading gravitational distortions around the enemy flagship. It's not just a ship anymore. It's becoming something else." Birth of an empire, the Fury. Unleashed. The first salvo from the human fleet lit up space like the birth of a new star. 48 ships fired as one, their weapons unleashing the accumulated fury of a species that had been underestimated for too long. Project Goliath devices aboard 7 different vessels discharged simultaneously, tearing holes in reality itself as they reached out to unmake the enemy flagship. Morrison gripped his command chair as the ironclad bucked under the recoil of her main weapons. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the precision of a machine, their hands flying over analog controls that had become extensions of their will. "Direct hit on the enemy flagship," reported Davis, his young voice tight with excitement. "Sir, we're reading massive structural damage across its forward sections." But even as the human weapons carved into the planet-sized enemy vessel, the Void Hunter fleet pressed forward. Their smaller ships moved like a swarm of mechanical insects, weaving between the human defensive line while their corruption beams lanced out toward the analog warships. "Incoming fire," Stone called out. "Multiple targets painting us with targeting beams." The enemy weapons struck the ironclad's hull, but instead of the devastating system failures that had crippled other fleets, the beams simply dissipated against analog armor and mechanical systems. The Void Hunter's primary advantage was useless against technology that predated digital integration by centuries. "Return fire, all batteries," Morrison ordered. "Show them what human engineering can do." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The elegant dance of energy weapons and coordinated fleet maneuvers gave way to something far more primitive and infinitely more deadly. The human ships fought like rabid wolves, using tactics that other species would have considered barbaric. Admiral Voss's voice crackled over the fleet communication channel. "All ships execute pattern Omega-7. Target their command nodes and ignore the small fry." The human fleet broke formation, abandoning the neat lines and coordinated movements that characterized galactic warfare. Instead, they scattered into hunting packs, each group focusing on a different section of the enemy fleet with single-minded determination. The Tide Turns Taurus's voice echoed through the ironclad's intercom system as the ship shuddered under another volley of enemy fire. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the enemy flagship. Whatever they're charging, it's drawing power from every ship in their fleet." Morrison studied the tactical display, watching as the smaller Void Hunter vessels began to dim It's slow. They're sacrificing their escort ships to power some kind of superweapon. The enemy flagship, despite the massive damage inflicted by the human fleet's opening salvo, was still operational. Worse, it was growing. As power flowed into it from the dying escort ships, new sections began to unfold from its hull like the petals of some mechanical flower. "Sir?" Davis called out, his voice strained. "I'm reading gravitational distortions around the enemy flagship. It's not just a ship anymore. It's becoming something else." What emerged from the transformation was beyond classification. The Void Hunter flagship had become a living space station, its hull now covered with weapons that defied conventional understanding. But more disturbing were the appendages that reached out from its core, tendrils of dark energy that began to weave themselves into the fabric of space itself. They're trying to create a permanent foothold, Morrison realized. If they finish that construction, they'll be able to summon reinforcements directly into this system. Admiral Voss's voice cut across the fleet channel. "All ships with Goliath devices. Prepare for coordinated strike. We end this now." But before the human fleet could execute their attack, the enemy flagship fired. The weapon it unleashed wasn't a beam or a projectile. It was a wave of pure corruption that washed over the battlefield like a digital plague, seeking systems to infect and technology to turn against its creators. The alien ships that had remained in the system to observe the battle suddenly found themselves under attack by their own systems. AI cores turned against their crews, weapons targeted their own ships, and life support systems began to shut down. In the space of minutes, the pride of galactic civilization was reduced to drifting hulks. But the human ships sailed through the corruption wave like rocks through water. Their analog systems, their mechanical controls, their primitive but reliable technology proved immune to an attack that had just crippled every other vessel in the system. "Now," Morrison said quietly, "fire everything. The final gambit." What happened next would be remembered as the moment that changed the galaxy forever. 7 human ships, each carrying a Project Goliath device, fired simultaneously at the enemy flagship. The weapons didn't just damage their target, they began to unravel it at the fundamental level, tearing apart the bonds that held matter together.